Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Back at you again with another episode. Real quick, before I introduce my guest, let me just grab this memo off the floor. Hold on. There we go. Alrighty. Gonna start by reading off a memo. I figured this was more important than some of the other ones we've been receiving lately because I can see it is from the HR department, which, as of course you know, stands for the Homunculus Research Department. And it says this. You may have heard rumors that after 20 years in operation, we finally brought something unliving to life. You may also have heard it was comprised of gold, lead, and a tablespoon of Tabasco. You may have heard that it escaped our department and incapacitated several of your fellow employees. We, the Homunculus Department, urge you not to believe such pernicious rumors and water cooler gossip. P.S. Should anyone happen upon a little gold man breathing fire, please contact us immediately. Signed, the HR Department. Which, gosh, wow, just so many wells of confidence built up in these people, bringing stuff to life out of nothing. I'm sure that won't come back to bite us in any way, shape, or form. Well, I am joined today by a musician that I discovered online, first via YouTube, and then further on, little down the road, through SoundCloud. And I found this music, and the first time I heard it, the only way I can describe it is it sounded iconic. Like it came from an existing thing that I had never seen before. And it was so fascinating to me. I've always loved soundtracks, and I've always loved music that gives me vivid pictures in my brain. And so I am here in this, what appears to be some sort of radio station that I didn't know we had. Because every once in a while I'll turn on my little shortwave, and this music would come flooding through, and it was just gorgeous. And I finally figured out where it's coming from. It's coming from this radio station. I am joined today by Rubidium Rings. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. I'm glad to be here.
Well, you know, I wanted to kick this episode off, so I have a little game for you. And it is now time for everyone's favorite part of the show, identifying fairy tale endings. This is where the music comes in. All right, so what I have here, I have different endings to fairy tales. They're not necessarily like the words right before the end, but like how the story's going by the end. And basically, I'm just going to give you a description of like basically the end of a story. And your job will be to figure out which story it comes from and /or whether or not you think it's real. Hopefully I've written these in such a way that it's somewhat obvious where they come from. The first one might be a little bit difficult. All right, so are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. These are going to be wild. Okay, so number 1. A bride walks down the aisle while 2 magic doves peck out the eyes of her stepsisters.
Interesting. Okay. What a great way to start this off. I can't think of a fairy tale that would be anything from.
Oh, trust me. Get used to that.
Yeah, it sounds more like biblical wrath than anything.
Okay. Let me clue you in. I will say the use of stepsisters in the description was purposeful.
Okay. Fairy tales with stepsisters. Oh, that would be Cinderella.
Ding, 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 ding! You are correct! So, of course, I have to pull from, like, the darkest versions of these stories. But yeah, apparently there was essentially a Cinderella DLC, like a later written version by the Brothers Grimm that had more to the story, and it involved like, because in the Brothers Grimm version, you've probably heard the fact that in the original, like the stepsisters are like lopping off parts of their feet to fit the slipper, and they get found out each time. But in this really weird addition to the story, they both show up at Cinderella's wedding. And the 2 magic doves that brought her the dress basically blind her stepsisters because they're still awful people at the wedding, and they're trying to like schmooze to get in good with the prince and the royal family, apparently. And when I first read that, I was like, what?
I had no idea they even made an epilogue to it.
Yeah, there's a really weird additional part, like a later copy of it with that little additional piece on it. So again, this next one, it will be your job. It's basically like you get a point if you can identify what it's from, and then I'll say you also will have to tell me whether it's real or not, because these bend the fabric of time and space and don't make any sense, okay? So the second one, a puppet lay limply on a horse as it gallops into the sky.
The only fairy tale I can think of relating to a puppet would be Pinocchio.
Ding, 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 ding! It is Pinocchio. Is it the real ending or not?
Flies into the sky? I don't think Pinocchio dies and I don't get sent to heaven. I don't think that's what I think of immediately when I hear
Okay, all right, I'm gonna give you the point. So, I'm gonna give you the point. He does not fly into the sky, but I gotta warn you, and this is real. In the original Pinocchio, the story ends with him getting hung from a tree. I kid you not.
Wow.
There is an
That's
actual,
crazy.
like, poetic, like, couple sentences that the original writer of Pinocchio uses to basically describe him dying. And it is... I couldn't believe what I was reading. I was like, there is no way that this is how the original story ends, but it absolutely is. He's just hanging from a tree like a weird wooden wind chime. And that's the end of the story.
Wow.
Okay.
That is so depressing.
Yes, it is. Moving on to number 3. An amphibian is bashed against a wall.
Oh my gosh. I didn't know these had such depravity in them.
Oh,
Jeez.
the original German ones are so, like, appalling.
Amphibian?
Mhm.
Whoa.
Yep.
See, I feel like this would be fake because I don't know any fairy tales about it relating to amphibians. Oh wait, unless it's the one where the princess and the frog.
Yes,
Actually,
yes.
that's-
Ding, 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 ding. So you've identified
a
what
second.
story it is, but is that the real ending?
Oh my gosh. In my heart, I really hope it's no. But I want to lean on yes.
You are correct! In the original
Oh my
story,
gosh.
the curse isn't lifted with a kiss, it's lifted when she wings the frog into a wall.
Wow.
And then the curse lifts. It's just animal violence for no reason.
And he turns back into a human?
Yeah! No, he's fine. But that's how the curse is lifted in the original story. It's not a magical kiss. She just picks him up and chucks him against a wall.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Jeez.
This one's really difficult. I don't expect you to guess the... I might have to give you a hint on which one this comes from, because this one's really obscure. A blinded prince stumbles through the wilderness looking for his long-haired lover and his child.
Oh, I know this. It's Rapunzel.
You're correct! Ding, 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 ding! Is it the real? Is it the real or the fake?
I want to say it's real because I remember a detail about him getting blind and like going through like these like brambles to like find
You are
her.
correct. I'm going to give it to you. Yeah, he falls out of the tower. The godmother, I think, either pushes him or he trips and falls out, lands in a bunch of thorns, gets blinded, and then wanders the wilderness for like years, apparently, and then eventually runs back into Rapunzel and like her tears magically heal his eyes. But just the visual of a dude wandering around the wilderness blind, I was like, there's a reason why Disney didn't add that in the Tangled movie, because that's
Yeah.
that's woof. All right, this one's gonna be, I think you'll get this one easily. A witch is crushed when her candy house collapses on her.
Hansel and Gretel.
Correct. Ding, 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 ding. Real or fake ending?
I want to say fake because I feel like I remember them putting her in the oven.
You are correct. Ding, 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 ding. You're correct. I believe Gretel pushes her into the oven, and then they leave.
Wow.
But yeah, I was like, I went on a whole Wikipedia thing earlier, and I basically was just like Control F looking for like the grim version of any of these stories because, like, okay, to be fair, they didn't write them, but they like collected them, and I don't know what it was, but they would always choose the darkest versions as their official versions to add in books for children. And granted, like, a lot of the times they were going for like a morality tale, so they were really trying to like impress upon young children, like, I don't know, the horrors of adult life. I don't know what they were thinking. I guess life back then was just really awful when these are the sorts of stories that people were telling their kids.
You know, I think if I was back then, I think if I grew up a little bit, I think I'd come to love those stories.
Oh, my favorite part of Princess and the Frog is when she whips him into a concrete wall. Just imagining the sound of a tiny little toad hitting against a wall. It's just so upsetting. Speaking of awful people, have you heard of the shopping cart theory?
I have not.
So I am looking here at this article, and a couple years ago, this is one of those internet things that every once in a while my brain will take me back to because it's something that's sort of unresolved in my brain. Like the whole blue and black dress versus white and gold dress. That whole fiasco that bordered on like political levels of hatred and vitriol being spewed at people who did not agree with colors that were quite obvious to me. I'll move on. But the shopping cart theory, I think it was originally created on Reddit. So I will read from this article here. What is the making of a good person? Different people use different scales to determine who is good and who is not. Over the years, there have been many factors that have been used to categorize people, and the internet keeps providing more updated benchmarks for us to measure people by. The latest theory that has been making rounds on the internet is the shopping cart theory, and it can perfectly define a person's character. It's a modern-day take on the trolley problem with a more real-life application and implication. Depending on how you answer the following question, you are either a good or a terrible person. Would you return a shopping cart to its designated spot after use, or would you simply leave it wherever you want? Of course, this is provided that there is no dire emergency. The theory was picked up from a Reddit forum and was posted by a Twitter user for further discourse. The shopping cart is the ultimate litmus test for whether a person is capable of self-governing, the post explains. To return the shopping cart is an easy, convenient task, and one which we all recognize as the correct, appropriate thing to do. To return the shopping cart is objectively right. There are no situations other than dire emergencies in which a person is not able to return their cart. Simultaneously, it is not illegal to abandon your shopping cart. Therefore, the shopping cart presents itself as the apex example of whether a person will do what is right without being forced to do it. So if you choose to return the cart, then you're a good person, at least according to this theory. And my brain thought of this, because I don't know, let's see, I think this post that I'm reading from dated back in 2021. And I feel like that lines up with in my brain about when this whole resurgence took place. But the reason why I was reminded of it was because a couple months ago, I was in a parking lot and I saw a shopping cart that had been pulled up to one of those little medians that has the curb around it and like decorative stones or mulch or something. And someone had pulled it up and put the wheels up over the edge so that way it couldn't go anywhere. But they still didn't return it to the corral. They didn't return the cart, but they had enough forethought to think, well, I don't want it rolling around and damaging someone's car, that's the confusing part to me. So I just found like an image that I'll throw here into the terminal that's in obviously every single room here in this building. It actually shows the one I'm talking about. I think it's labeled as chaotic neutral.
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
Somebody actually made like a 3x3 matrix that shows all the different outcomes of this situation using like I think D&D terminology. So you have your lawful good, which is returned into the store, like all the way inside Neutral good is returned to a corral. Chaotic good is launched into a corral. So just sort of lazily, like you see how far away from it you can roll it in. Lawful neutral is returned to another store. True neutrals return to the poor. So I guess you let them use it. Chaotic neutral is, I guess, what I saw, where it says returned to nature.
Returned to nature.
Lawful evil is unreturned but neatly stacked. So if there's just like a loose stack that you just join, neutral evil left in a parking space. Oof, that's bad. And then chaotic evil is returned to a culvert, and it's just overturned in a pool of water, just nowhere near the store. And it's posts like this. I just don't understand. Like, how do these shopping carts get so far away from the parking lot?
You know, it's so... I have seen a thing exactly like the Chaotic Evil with it. When I was in Louisville last spring, I went down to the water banks, and there was I don't know from what store, but there was a shopping cart just laying in the river. Just non-moving, just laying upside down in the river. It's on my Instagram. I'll have to like find the picture.
You'll have to send it to me.
Weird.
This was, let's see, probably about a month back. Up where I live, there's like a very high traffic area where there's a mall and restaurants, you name it. And there's a Target up there. And I swear, like 2 miles from the Target on like a bike path, nowhere near the main road, there's just a Target shopping cart. Just sitting there, nothing in it, nobody attending it. It's just in the middle of the bike path. And I was like, how did you do this? There's like no sidewalks for somebody to take it. They would have had to like just go over like parking lots and grass embankments behind hotels, across highways. How did they do it?
They took an entire journey to take this cart to where they wanted to go, and then they just gave up halfway.
Yeah, it's like the whole Devious Licks thing. It's like if you're gonna steal something that doesn't belong to you for the memes, you cannot chicken out like that.
And of all things, a shopping cart.
That too.
Which is... I mean, yeah, people, with the Devious Licks trend, people would steal the most random of objects. And I thought that it couldn't get crazier, but it just kept getting worse and worse. The craziest item I saw was probably like those big, those like road signs you see, where they show you like the exits. Someone managed to get their hands on one of those, and I don't know how.
Wait, like an actual like exit, like where it shows like the city you're gonna be entering, like the big ones. How? And it's like, if you've seen those, like they look small from like when you're driving under them, but they are like actually gigantic. If you're, like, they'd fill up a wall. They're massive. How? How? I don't understand. See, here's the thing. Like, obviously, when the whole Devious Licks thing was going on, you feel bad for, like, the workers who work at these places where customers are, like, just taking a soap dispenser off the wall. Like, I never vibed with that. But people who are, like, rescuing stuff from going to the dumpster, or, like street signs that get, like, bent and then thrown away. There's actually an antique shop not far from my house that's really cool, because they have a bunch of, like, official signage. So, like, if you wanted something like that, like street signs that were replaced, or specific signs, dead end signs, stop signs, like they have all those that you can have legally. But this is actually, it kind of reminds me. So my brother, this will date this episode, but that's okay. There's a Post Malone Canes partnership going on right now, and my younger brother's having like an ethical dilemma because in like their parking lot or outside their building, there's like a Post Malone cardboard cutout that's just sort of shoddily zip tied to a pole, and it's taking every ounce of self-control within him not to just drive over there at like 3 a.m. and just take a pair of scissors and, you know, snip and, you know, right in the back of the car. And because
it would be so easy.
It would be so easy. And he talked with like the employees about like, hey, when this promotion's over and you guys are just going to get rid of this, like, could we have it? And they said no, because of like whatever policies there are. It probably has a lot to do with like copyright, whatever the heck, through whatever deal. But it's such a shame, because I feel like a lot of these companies, like Raising Cane's, for example, Taco Bell, if they just had like a merch store, people would buy official merch from them. Like if you just put not just like random stuff, like stuff that you're doing for promotion, people would buy it.
Put brand on anything, people will gravitate towards it. I mean, you have Apple purists that will just stay with that brand no matter how expensive their items get. Like those VR glasses that like just got revealed.
Gosh.
Like the $1,000
Yes.
things.
Yep.
Ugh, that it just kills me. It's so...
Didn't Google Glass implode like last year or something like that, where they finally gave up trying to do the whole augmented reality with the glasses thing, and then Apple was just like, don't mind if I do.
Yeah, they'll capitalize it.
Dude, Google Glass was forever ago. Hold on, I gotta look this up. When was Google Glass a thing? I feel like that's been around since like 2012, where people were talking about Google Glass.
It's definitely an older form of it.
Yeah, I gotta know when this was. When were they trying to do this? On January 15th, 2015, Google announced that it would stop producing Google Glass prototype. So prior to 2015, let's see. Google started selling a prototype of Google Glass to qualified glass explorers in the US April 15, 2013. And then this year, Apple was just like, I want some of that sweet, sweet Google Glass pie. And then the world went absolutely ape over it because it's Apple.
Yeah.
And Apple can do no
imagine
wrong.
Apple ever doing that.
Yeah, they can do no wrong, clearly. Clearly.
And it's crazy because like there is so much like augmented reality stuff being like developed right now. There's even Apple, and yet people are probably still going to buy the Apple stuff despite it being way more expensive than the other smaller, and maybe even, like, more functional ones.
Branding's powerful, man. That's the reason why freaking Supreme is able to sell crowbars and bricks with their logo on it, which, if I'm honest, is kind of a mid logo. Looks like a toothpaste logo. But they're able to sell stuff for like thousands of dollars for some reason.
Something about a red square or rectangle makes people go crazy.
I don't know what it is, man. I don't get it. I mean, it has to just be for the memes at this point. Like, it has to be. Because if I remember correctly, one of the main reasons why it existed in the first place was that it was kind of riffing off of brands and how like simple and basic it is. And it was sort of a meme. Oh yeah, we'll throw the logo on this and that. But then unironically, the power of consumerism turned it into an actual thing. So like they've become what they hated most. But now they're making all that money. It's like people are buying it.
Yeah, I have multiple friends who are very into like branded shoes, and especially sports shoes. They will drop like hundreds of dollars on like the newest Nikes, or it's crazy. I mean, some of them look like amazing, but I mean, some of them out there, like I remember I saw these weird shoes on Amazon last week. They looked like there's this weird, one of the weirdest movies I ever watched that I didn't finish was it was called Crimes of the Future.
What?
And it is I think I've only gotten 20 minutes through it. It is such a weird movie. It's
Crimes of the Future.
It's not what you expect. It's like, I don't even know how to explain it, but it's got like weird like sci-fi fleshy technology in it.
Okay.
And there are these shoes that I saw on Amazon last week that looked like something from that movie, and they looked like something like if you wanted to dress up as an alien very ironically, then you would buy those shoes. And yet people are like, I found out that the specific shoes are like starting to become like a trend, and they look so silly. Like clown shoes. It's
Crimes
weird.
of the Future. Hold on, I gotta check out the Rotten Tomatoes score on this bad boy. It's got a 80% for the tomato meter, so I think that's the reviewers, and a 50% audience score.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it from what I saw, because the friend who recommended me the movie said that it was one of the weirdest movies I've ever watched.
This is from 2022.
Yeah, it's new.
Okay, directed by David Cronenberg. That makes a little bit of sense because based just on the director, I think he's pretty well known for making weird movies.
Like, his most recent movie, Infinity Pool, that came out this year. I adore that movie, but it is so weird and creepy.
Okay,
I'm
hold
like,
on.
yeah, I'm mentioning all these horror movies. I'm a big horror buff.
Okay. All right. Well, hold on. I'm just gonna the description of Crimes of the Future is so wild. Let's see. It follows a performance artist duo. So right there, making a movie about performance artists is already weird. Who perform surgery for audiences in a future where human evolution has accelerated for much of the population. Although the film shares its title with Cronenberg's 1970 film of the same name, it is not a remake as the story and concept are unrelated, and there's no connection between the two films whatsoever. The film marked Cronenberg's return to the science fiction and horror genres for the first time since Existence from 1999. So, like, performing biosurgeons? It's so weird.
I gotta finish that movie at some point because it's like one of the weirdest enigmatic forms of film I've ever seen. Like one of the first scenes, and this isn't really that much of a spoiler, it's just so weird. One of the first scenes is this like child like eating a plastic bucket or like ceramics. And he's like starving. I didn't understand it at all.
So like humans eat plastic now, I guess? Maybe?
I think it was because he was like he was like extremely starved. I'm not sure. I don't even know how it's related to the plot at all.
Okay, hold on. This is down the page on the wiki. I don't know who this character Tensor is. I think he's they're the performing artists duo. I think it's the guy who Viggo Mortensen plays. Tensor meets with Timlin, who reveals to him the agenda of the evolutionists. They have chosen to modify their digestive system to make them able to eat plastics and other synthetic chemicals.
Okay, there's the answer.
Their principal food is a purple processed candy bar of toxic waste fatally poisonous to others. Why? What a strange idea for a movie. That's so weird. So, oh my gosh, dude, I'm thinking about like performance art. Oh my gosh, that reminded me of something. So, years ago, my oldest sister, it was kind of like a graduation ceremony. I don't remember if it was like to celebrate the end of like a semester or there was some milestone. And she went to this community college for a little bit. And for some reason, well, I know the reason, they decided to have the like performance art drama group do a performance like before the ceremony.
Oh.
And if you've ever been to like an academic function, they are tedious. They go on forever, right? And we're sitting in our seats. I'm sitting next to one of my sisters, and we're being supportive. We're there so we can celebrate our sister getting, whatever award she's getting and whatnot. We're sitting through this performance art piece, right? And, it's got the scant set. It's very performance art. Everybody's got on like black t-shirts, black jeans. It's very minimalist. And I kid you not, the whole thing was basically about prison reform, right? So they're trying to do performance art about prison reform right before like a ceremony in like a fast manner. So this character gets thrown in jail, I think for like having weed on him or something. And then 5 minutes after getting transferred to prison, he bumps into a smooth-talking Southern gentleman who, like, for some reason he's one of the prisoners. He's just this random Southern gentleman character who speaks like he should be, like, in the Revolutionary War era and gives him a Bible that has more drugs in it. Like, he was going to use him as, like, a drug mule or something, and he gets caught, and he gets more prison time. And it just keeps devolving, but like not in any logical way. And by the end of the play, the dude who got thrown in prison strangles the Southern gentleman to death in prison. And now he's in there for life because he killed the Southern gentleman. And I kid you not, it was split up into acts. acts. There were 3 of them. And when they would announce the acts as they were happening, and when the 3rd act started, one of the dudes, some hero in the audience said, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." Like out loud. And cuz he said what everyone was thinking, which is like, what are we doing? What is this? And why does it exist?
I can't even imagine how that would look like.
I felt I was losing my mind. Like I was actively losing brain cells as it was happening. I could not believe it. And of course, whenever you're in a social setting where it would be completely inappropriate to laugh out loud, that makes everything funnier. And it was only difficult because prior to that, and then after that, I mean, things at these functions, just there's always stuff that's awkward or funny, unintentionally funny or creepy. That one ceremony sticks out in my brain just because the sheer amount of ludicrousness that went on before, during, and after. Just like so random, so weird. You know, speakers trying to tell corny jokes that don't land. Speakers going up there to read off the names that, like, they pick the person with, like, the thickest accent to read off the students' names. So, like, you can't really understand. It's like a cruel joke. And then, like, you had, like, one professor said something somewhat creepy about one of the students. And the whole time I just keep looking over at my sister and we're just, like, trying to keep it together. Because we're, like, laughing under our breath because the whole thing's ridiculous.
I wonder if the whole thing was a performance art.
Dude, that would have been... Can you imagine if just the end of the whole ceremony, somebody just walks up there and is like, "You've all just been part of an experiment." Like, I would not be surprised. It was the way my brother describes it. You know, we were driving back from something last week or so, and there was like 2 instances where people just did really dumb things in cars that didn't make any sense or like parked in a non-spot. And so every time that happens, my brother will just point to it and be like, "Oh, look, there's the NPCs are glitching." And I'll look over and it's just someone just absolutely just pointed the wrong way on a road. It's like, what's happening? What are you doing?
Yeah, I've seen some weird car accidents around, like in the Midwest. Like, it's just... People here are so interesting.
Very interesting, yes.
They really do feel like NPCs here.
Yes, they do.
I mean, you go up to them and you're like... They literally, like, you walk into a store and they're like, "Hello, how are you today?" They're all so friendly, and it's just really funny to see them, like, go through these, like, small talk conversations that I've just heard a million times in my mind replay.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Weather? Like, dialogue about the weather. You add that in there. This one's my personal favorite, is, like, if you're in a store and you need to sneak past someone, or someone almost walks into you, at least the one that I hear all the time is, "Oh, sorry." Specifically that. It's like one word together. It's, "Oh, sorry."
Yeah, I've heard that a lot too. Just the word "ope."
And I, oop. Yeah, it very much is that. It's literally like, oh gosh, the PlayStation 2 Spider-Man game, with like the dialogue of the NPC New Yorkers, there's only a select number of responses that these NPCs have to like you running past them. And, you know, you're, like, saving people from sinking boats, and you'll walk past someone who just saw it happen, and if you get too close to them and they, like, stumble backwards like you just ran into them, they'll just be like, "What a cheese ball!" And I walk in here, and it's like, oh my gosh. And there's, like I said, there's only, like, 5 lines of dialogue they have, and after a while, it's just so annoying.
Yeah, that reminds me so much of the Skyrim guards.
Oh my gosh, dude. Ugh. So frustrating. You pick something up on accident. You didn't even steal it. You just, like, knock some stuff over, and they start freaking out.
Yeah, I remember when I first, because I first got Skyrim when it came out in 2011 on the Xbox 360.
Whoa,
I was,
no
like,
kidding.
a young child.
Wow.
Yeah, and because my dad played Oblivion and Morrowind. He's been a long time Elder Scrolls fan.
Okay.
And he turned me onto the Skyrim when it first came out. And as a child, I remember being afraid of the Draugrs.
Oh gosh, they
was
were scary.
Terrified. Anytime I went into Whiterun, and I would always go up to the the Jarl's like castle, I would that like those that up like when you go upstairs into like the rooms where they have all the display cases of all the
Yep.
swords. I
Yep.
tried breaking into them and stealing them, but there are these guards that are like always there. And
Yep.
my child self didn't understand the concept of like taking
Sneaking.
something while not being seen. So I would just stand up, completely take stuff, and then have to run out and try to get out of the city or pay my bounty. But most of the time I ran.
Oh my gosh, dude. Those games, like specifically Skyrim, like I haven't played any of the previous versions because like I grew up, the first console that I had was a Wii. Like that was the first one I ever had. And so like I missed out on a lot of classics, but I did play through Skyrim, several years back on my computer. And yeah, going into like the barrows where the Draugr are, so nerve-wracking. You're playing at 3 a.m. in the dark, and like you're so self-conscious. Everyone you pass, you're like, are you gonna get up? You better not get up. Don't you dare stand up. It got to the point where it's like I'm sneak attacking every single one if they're lying down, just in case. And oh my gosh, if you get the noises of them like shambling around,
Yeah.
man. Oh gosh, the bone chilling. Bone chilling.
Yeah, those noises the skeletons made, like the creaking, was so
Oh,
freaky.
yeah, the really weird noises. They have a lot of the sound engineering in that game is really good, along with the music. And that actually,
Oh, the music. I think the Skyrim soundtrack has got to be my favorite soundtrack of anything ever. It is just so amazing. And it's like also it's an inspiration for my music. I mean, I've got two songs in my mind that like sound a lot like some of the random ambience tracks that would play in the game. It's just such a beautiful soundtrack.
that actually leads perfectly into the more interview aspect of this conversation because obviously, like anytime I have people on who I've known for years, I don't usually ask them to go as in depth on the sorts of things that they create. But obviously, since this is our first discussion, since I found this radio station, I guess I'll ask the somewhat stock standard. How did you get into music in the first place?
Well, I'll start with I guess so my grandfather on my father's side, he was in a psychedelic rock band in the 60s called
What?
the yeah, he was the guitarist for it they're called the Litter. They're really good. And he and sadly he was estranged from my family for a while up until he died, but because he was not the best guy. But
Gotcha.
he when he died, my dad got his guitars, and when I was a kid, I would always see his guitars like in his rooms and like kind of just like hung up or on the stands, and that was like the first intrigue I had towards music. I never because I never really started playing an instrument until I played piano around the age of like 7.
Oh,
I think.
wow. Okay.
I had this old, really bad Casio keyboard that had the worst quality sounds. Like it's so distorted. It's horrible quality. But there was this training thing that the keyboard had built into it to where you could I have the keyboard autoplay a song and you could see visually what the notes were.
Oh,
And
okay.
my childhood self, there was this one etude by Chopin, or how you pronounce his name, I don't exactly remember, but I ended up learning one of his etudes fully on that horrible piano when I was like 10 years old,
Wow.
and sadly I forget it now, but that was like the first musical piece I learned, but with the piano, that was like the genesis of it, but I never really. And then actually, after that, I in middle school, I ended up going into orchestra and I played cello for 7 years, I want
Oh,
to say.
wow. So from
Uh,
piano to cello.
yeah,
Wow.
big, super
Wow.
change.
That's a big change. That is very big.
Yeah, I ended up playing cello from 6th grade up until 11th. And then that was pretty much like when I played the cello, that's how I learned how to look at music and hear, oh, this is how a good melody sounds and rhythm and all the terminology for it, I guess. But I
Mhm.
never started writing music until COVID. because that was when I got to finally like sit down with my thoughts, and I'm like, okay, I'm bored. What do I do? And
Wait a
I ended
second.
up,
Hold the freaking phone. Because this is information I did not have. Are you telling me that, like, all of your discography dates back only to 2020?
yeah, my
What
oldest
the
song is
heck?
from June of 2020.
Oh my gosh! Okay. Okay. For context, do you have, like, a rough number of songs that you've made since then anywhere?
Actually, look on the YouTube right now. They have a, let's see, and this is not including all my side projects. I've got lots more, but
Oh, I figure there's plenty of unreleased tracks, but, like, just the released ones.
yeah. According to the topic channel on YouTube, there are 283 videos.
Okay. 283. So that includes all the singles that are part of the albums, right?
Yes. All the songs on the albums, even if I release this like one of the songs early on, that is counted as well. As long as I upload it to streaming services. Pretty much.
That is extremely impressive because based on the sheer not only number of the songs, but the quality of the production. I assumed that you'd been at this for like, I don't know, at least 5 to 7 years, at least. Because I think I said earlier that I found you through YouTube, and the reason was I think it's because YouTube will sometimes recommend things to you that are in the somewhat similar vein to what you've been uploading or whatever's on your channel, whatever you've been watching. And I started dabbling with music several years back, just, messing around with an app on my phone. And let's see, I believe it was Cryptic, the full EP. This is dated 7 months back, was recommended to me. And I listened to it, and it was like love at first sound. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And like the visuals just included with it, I was like, so this is somebody whose music is good, but someone who also has great attention to detail when it comes to creating something visually intriguing at the same time. Because I don't feel like necessarily all musicians put as much effort into the visuals as you do. So the fact that you started making music in 2020 or started writing music in 2020 is mind-boggling. But I'll let you go on.
Yeah, I released my first song ever. It's called The White Hallways. I released it like June 18th, 2020, I want to say. I think it's kind of funny because I didn't really the reason for me like starting to write music for myself really just came about because I used to be a writer.
Okay.
I would write these short stories in middle school, and they would be about like random things, mostly like horror or sci-fi.
Right.
But the problem was I could never commit to the stories as much because to write a whole book, it has to be multiple tens of pages, hundreds of pages. It has to be.
Yep.
It takes a long time to write a book, and I just did not have the patience.
Fair enough.
To go through all that. But I had all these fleshed out stories in my mind, and I was like, okay, I want to like get these out somehow, and then I don't know how I found the idea, but it just popped in my head, like, why not just try music? And I remember pulling up a mobile DAW app on my phone and just making a random song, and then that's how it came about.
That's amazing. So that actually leads perfectly into my next question, which is, it's almost impossible to listen through your music and not notice the story aspect of what you're doing, right? Like I think it's very much apparent, at least as I was listening through, it was impossible for me to not notice that there seemed to be underlying stories that inspired the songs. Like I could hear that. And even just based on the titles alone, it seemed very much like these songs were from something, right? But something that didn't exist. So it was driving my brain crazy because I was like, it feels like these are written for projects that don't exist. And I think that's where some of the nicheness of what you make really comes into play. Of it's good enough, quality-wise, to be used for things, right? But the presentation of them as being part of some story, because ultimately my big question, because I'm always looking for connections to things, my burning question was, is there an overarching plot or storyline that connects multiple albums, or like how much of your music exists in the same world, let's say? Because I'm sure some of these stories are like maybe standalone or something like that, but it was driving my brain crazy because I was like, how much of this music comes from the same story or collection of stories or the same world, I suppose?
I've got a lot of them. I have so many one-off albums, so many like two album things. A lot of times I like to just do like multiple series of albums, like how I did with Possessed Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume
Right,
3,
yes.
etc. Uh, so yeah, there are multiple stories. I kind of just like whenever I make an album, there's always going to be a story behind it. I love writing through music. It's I almost like the way I kind of like think about how I want to make something is like the soundtrack to how it plays. So like if there's an event that's happening in a story, like for instance, a character dies,
Yeah.
I would think in my mind, okay, if this was a TV show or a movie, what would be playing in the background? And then I make something akin to what I think would be playing in the background. So I kind of just it is like to kind of what you were saying, where if I could like sum it up in one sentence, they're all soundtracks to films that don't exist.
That's
Really.
so cool. That's so freaking cool. Like, I can't fully capture what a niche concept that really is. If I was like to list off a couple of my personal favorites, Plastic Forgery has to be up there. And once we finish the episode, you're gonna have to tell me where the heck you got all this archival footage, because it haunts me to this day in the best way possible. And then let's see, Garden of Apollo. I believe it's called The Lost Ship. And then let's see, there's one just simply called High B, which I think the way that I heard it, the first thing that came to my mind when listening through High B is it sounds like when your hero in a story that takes place in space does some heroic deed where they're going to be left behind, and they know this, but they're willing to sacrifice themselves, and so they're floating off into space knowing that they have just sacrificed themselves for the greater good. And in a lot of these stories, they're magically revived or something, but High B, just like, I could not hear it without getting the visuals in my brain. And I think that's one of the reasons why your music is so powerful, is because it invites visual media, right? It doesn't take place in a void. And that's why even if there's no movie going on, the visuals that you use on YouTube when you post, it adds even a little extra spice to it. Because obviously I love it even if there was no visuals at all. But heck, I'll take whatever I can get that like adds to my experience of listening through one of your albums, because they're so phenomenal. And some of these albums are not short. That's the other thing that I was impressed by. A lot of music that I make on my phone, heck man, I'll get bored after like 45 seconds to a minute. I'll be like, I'm kind of done with this one. I'm fine if it just ends here. But like the sheer number of songs is just so inspiring to me. And the fact that you did it, like you said, within the last, 3 years is so impressive. And I can't say that enough. And I'd be curious to know, so who are a couple of your musical inspirations?
Well, the Skyrim soundtrack as a whole, definitely. I mean, I grew up with that soundtrack just playing constantly every time I played that game. So I've heard that so much, and that really helped like me with like the ambience aspect of it all. Just kind of like thinking of something being in the background, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be in the forefront. Also other ones I can cite. Vangelis, I adore his soundtracks like Blade Runner,
Okay.
especially Blade Runner. The biggest one though I'd have to say is Johnny Jewel. He is this I don't want to say small because he's pretty popular, but he got kind of does the same thing that I do, where he makes like these very long ambient albums that feel like they have a story, but they don't explicitly like state that they are. It just kind of flows like one.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I his albums are like some of my favorite albums ever. Like the way he uses the synthesizers in his songs are like so similar to how I use mine sometimes. I really take a lot of inspiration from him in his songwriting, and it yeah, it's just I just love electronic ambient music. That's
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like if you have a favorite sound or genre that like every time, like maybe even subconsciously, maybe you're not even trying to, but when you open up a fresh project in whatever app you use, what naturally do you start moving towards? Like what instruments, what sounds, what vibes do you sort of autopilot seek out that you just like to hear?
I gotta say something like maybe like a pad that just swells in
Mm,
and out and just like flows almost like a wave. I
okay.
love that. Just something that is and not necessarily like a drone, but just some kind of musical fluctuation, but not with note fluctuation, just something like in the sound. The way that like that's why I think the synthesizer is such a interesting instrument is because you can do so much with it.
Mm-hmm.
You've got
Yeah.
all these controls that you can mesh around and create pretty much anything with. And I've delved deeper into like the experimental aspect of it more now than earlier.
Right.
Because earlier on when I started my music, I was very minimalistic with the production. I would usually, because the app I started on was this app called Synth One,
Okay.
and it's got a really good high quality sounds, and I used a lot of the factory presets for my first few albums in it, and I they just like I would always make the melodies really simple because the way like the iPad I had it on my iPad and you could only fit like a certain number of keys on the screen without having you'd have to scroll the
Oh,
keyboard.
yep.
So I
Yep.
could conform myself to like only one or two, like 1 to 3 octaves, and it kind of it made me like kind of limit my musicianship a bit in a good way because it forced me into a box that I had
Yeah.
to create something from. And like all of my like if you even listen back and you compare like my oldest album to my newest album, it's like I have like these simple chord melodies or uh harmonic like undertones that really just like they're not complex in any way, but they sound very nice. It's just simple. I don't really look toward like some artists they look toward their music like old music as like cringy or come like when they came from a place of like a more indie production. I'm not that way really. I kind of just like every song I make it's like from it's something that I write, so like I take my time on it, and when I put it out it's like I love it. It's just something I wrote.
And just as like a feather in your cap, I have noticed like since I started following your music that within the past couple months a lot of your videos have been kind of popping off like in a very short period of time. Like people are listening to your albums, like people are listening to your songs, and like it just makes me happy that other people are finding your stuff. That makes me so happy. Is obviously prior to you being on the podcast, you allowed me the great privilege of using your music in the video essay I did on Joe Death. This is a couple months back now, and that video, people loved that video because it was a relatively new graphic novel. I'm not sure if you saw, but the creator left a comment as well. I got my blessing from him to do the video essay via Instagram before. But yeah, when I reached out to you about using your music, that was one of the big things that struck me when I first heard your music was it's like the perfect style of music for a video essay because it is professional, it's poised, and there's movement in it. It's a progression, right? Because when you're messing around with synths, I think one of the things that you mentioned is just all the things that you can do with it. But one of the big things that I like about that sort of music where you're messing around with pads and you're changing settings is that it feels like a living organism. It's moving. It's not sedentary in any way, shape, or form. And when you're making a video essay in a very real way, when you're, making the script, you're taking the audience from point A to point B. You're trying to prove a point based on, whatever your kind of thesis statement is, even if it's a very loose thesis statement. I mean, my Joe Death video was literally me just gushing about the book. There was no real academic aspect to it, not really. But, like, that video would not have been anywhere near as good without your music behind it. Like, it just wouldn't have. It brought an immediate vibe to it. It brought an immediate professionalism to it. And it was that movement, that momentum. It just felt so, I guess, like, planned and pre-thought. It just sounded so crisp. And, like, it's been such a pleasure to, like, discover more of your music, to go back into even the early stuff you're talking about. Because something that you said that really resonates with me is, I guess, finding the beauty in your restrictions when it comes to creating, right? Because, a lot of people might feel that being constrained to fewer options is a bad thing. And I can see that point to an extent, but as a person who can get a little bit scatterbrained and kind of wants to do a million different projects at the same time, and I get really used to spinning a lot of plates, I see those limitations less as limitations, but more like bumpers at a bowling alley. It's like, I'm going to go off into the gutter because I'm going to try and roll my ball over into someone else's lane to knock over their pins. I need those bumpers there to keep me in one lane, in one direction, at least until I can finish this project. That's my big problem. I suck at finishing projects. I love starting projects. So having those limitations, like you said, I think that your older music's all the better for that. I think it's almost more impressive to go out of your way to limit yourself in a couple ways for a specific project. Like, for an amount of time, say, okay, for this album, I'm not going to let myself use X, Y, or Z, and I'm going to specialize using this set of instruments, this set of synths. I'm going to try to communicate this theme throughout the songs. Having those bumpers there, I think, is really healthy for people who create stuff.
Yeah, actually, my two newest albums, Restraint and Sevenal, I actually purposely recorded both of those albums almost completely on specific synthesizers live.
Wow.
I believe everything in Sevenal except for the drums is all live played, not even edited. I just live played songs. Like, in the moment, I wanted to make something on how, because I base all of my music, like, I base off of, like, some producers are more analytical with their music production, like with like music theory, while I am more of like, it comes from like my feeling, like my emotional aspect, like, okay, what do I feel in this moment to make like this song
Absolutely.
or album, and I just do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, I can't tell you like how much pleasure that I've had, like, listening to this, or like, heck, when I read, like, I try and read for 30 minutes a day. When I'm reading my stuff, I'm like, I know exactly what to listen to while I'm reading, and it's this stuff right here. It's Rubidium Rings tracks, because it's not obnoxious, it's not monotonous, it doesn't distract me. If anything, it actually helps me focus. And since it does carry with it that sort of soundtrack aesthetic, it just, like, I don't know, it elevates whatever else I'm doing just to have it on in the background. It's phenomenal stuff.
Making music for films that don't exist, like, I really love just film. I love everything to do with like even if it's photography film or like in cinema film, there's anything to do with visual media I adore. I am a horrible visual artist, however. I'm not the best drawer.
Well, I think that's one thing. As we wind down here, that's one sort of cool thing that I've noticed. Like in my own work, in my own art, whatever I create at the time, because I hop all over the place. I do a lot of different things, and what's really cool is when you allow yourself to create stuff you're passionate about. A lot of times, it does end up taking you into new creative paths that maybe you wouldn't have had the confidence to do at first. Because like you just said, like you don't consider yourself much of a visual artist, but even if you just go to like your YouTube page and as you scroll down and just look at the thumbnails for your music, it has a very strong style. And like I said before, the visual aspect really does add a lot. It really does. And so whether it's whatever video editing you do for the videos or the thumbnails that you choose, whichever split second you decide to allow to represent the music that you've posted, I think you're better at the visual aspect of things than maybe you even realize.
I mean, I have been trying to delve more into music videos as of lately. Just like instead of like filming things in a traditional music video sense with the aspect of like a person being in, I kind of try to delve away from like having imagery of like humans in my like art, my cover arts, and because I try to make everything seem like a different universe and world, so I don't want it to seem too familiar, like, oh, that's like a person, so it feels like the same world that we are in. I want to make it fantastical.
Yeah.
And actually, with your point earlier of you saying taking things in like new creative directions, my second album, The Vestige of Lost Lives, that was the first album where I really tried to like delve less into the ambient and more into upbeat electronic. I think the fourth track on the album, Return to the Remnant, was the first time I had ever used drums
Whoa,
on a song.
Okay.
And looking back on it, it's so funny how like how easy it was, but back then it was like super hard for me to implement drums into my music. But now, I mean, actually, and it has helped me a lot more making pop music under different monikers, like how you said, Plastic Forgery with Ascenship. That's my other side project, and then Iconize is like all my pop thing I like to make. Just I've got like 6 different side projects. It's wild. I churn out music,
and that's awesome. Like again, especially if it's not forced. It's not like you creating it because like you feel like you need to. It wouldn't be the same if that was the case. I think that's what makes the amount of stuff that you make, but also the quality of what you make so impressive, because you can hear the intention behind it, and that's just so infinitely impressive to me.
I really like to before I make an album, I like to just think of what the story is going to start with. Like, okay, how am I going to start producing, not necessarily like in a chronological sense how this story is going to go, but how am I going to start with this? Like, I make one song and I have like, this is the start of the story, where do I go from here? And that's actually how I made the Possessed albums. So that's like they're all connected through each other with like the various characters and settings, but chronologically they are all over the place, because with those albums I never really I didn't want to make it seem like every like a chronological linear progression. It just didn't feel right to do that. So instead, I think for the first volume, I wasn't even going to make it a story. It was just going to be an album inspired by 80s music.
Okay, all right.
And it just did not go that way. I mean, this is like it's like the farthest thing from 80s music I can imagine. And I kind of just started with a character's theme, and I was like, okay, this is her theme. This is what it sounds like. How does this affect the rest of the album? Like, what sound should this have?
Right.
Because I try to have every album have like a specific kind of ambience. Because a lot of times I like to reuse sounds. I love calling back to different things.
Right.
like with a side project of mine, Unwanted Hands. There are these 2 tracks called The Boy and the Girl, which are singles as of right now, but they'll be on an album at some point.
Right.
I use the same bass, and they're almost exactly the same bass line, almost exactly the same drum line, but they're slightly different because it's supposed to be a duality between the two.
Yeah.
For it,
Yeah.
I take it into account how everything feels and where to go.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much as we wind down. Thanks again for being willing to be on the podcast, and thank you just in general for allowing me to purchase and use your music and the stuff that I'm making, because I feel that it's adding so much value to it. So I very much appreciate that, and I'll have all of your socials down below under the podcast episode. But I think that's gonna do it. So what exactly do you do here in this radio station? Are you just like spinning discs? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, we broadcast music to the rest of the tower here. You know, if you people want a little background music to help them incentivize work or incentivize other things, I play whatever they need. It can be anything.
So you can tune in to a Rubidium Rings track while you bring a little gold man to life.
Yes, it'll be inspiring.
It will. It really will. Well, thanks again for being on the podcast. That's going to do it for this episode. So thank you all so much for listening to the podcast, and we will catch you next time.